I'm making a brunoise of celery, carrots, and onions for endive braisée à la Madère because I've received this beautiful box from Belgium with blue paper, plastic paper, and row upon row of Belgian endive. We're doing the endive show next time on The French Chef. I've just received this beautiful package from Belgium, and it's beautifully packaged also with blue paper on top and plastic paper and some more blue paper on top of that with little designs, and there's row upon row of Belgian endive. It's just been thrown in from Brussels, especially for our endive show today on The French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
You know, I think all of us are always looking for something new in the way of cooked vegetables. And a lot of these vegetables that we think of as salads are awfully delicious cooked too. And I think Belgian endive is one of the most delicious of our winter vegetables and one of our most delicious cooked vegetables. Of course, it's hideously expensive, but it's so good. And if you serve it, if you're going to have sort of an inexpensive meal, if you serve cooked endive, it makes it seem very expensive indeed. And if you want to put on the dog, everyone knows that you have spent a great deal of money and that you love them. So I think it's one of the most perfect vegetables that there is. And when you buy it, you want to be sure that you buy the best endive possible. And it should look just like this. It's firm, and you notice that the points of the leaves come into a secure point, and they're not open at all. And this is, as an expensive vegetable, you see how carefully it is packed with all these careful rows and the blue paper in between. And so, as it is so expensive, you want to be sure and get a good quality. Now, here's a bad endive that you'll never want to buy. As you can see, the outside, the tip is spread apart quite a bit. And also, if you look at it, you'll see that it's a fairly deep green inside, and that means it's a bad piece of endive. And the good endive is ivory white and just a little bit yellowish at the tip. And the reason that it is white and pale is that it's grown underground. It's put in trenches, and then they cover it with a light sand or soil so that it grows entirely deprived of light. And it's a very special way of growing. And the best endive comes from Belgium. I think other people have tried, and they just don't know how to do it so well. And it's a winter vegetable. It starts in October and ends in March. And I think the height of the season is really from November to February. And when you buy it, you can keep it for, a good 10 days if you wrap it just in a damp, slightly damp towel and put it in a plastic bag and stick it in the refrigerator. And it will really keep very well if you do that to it. And when you're buying it, I think it's best to go to a store where you can pick it out yourself so that you can get the best, the palest, and the firmest endive. And then when you prepare it for cooking, you'll see there's the root end here and there's the tip end there. You just trim very lightly the end of the root where it's very slightly discolored, and be very careful that you don't separate the leaves from the root, so it's just a little shaving off of the end. And if by any chance the tip happens to be dry, you can just cut the tip off. But presumably, if it's nice and fresh, you don't have to trip the end off. And I also find that if they're clean and firm and closely gathered together, that you don't have to wash them. So I never wash them at all if they're clean, because they're so beautifully packed and sanitary looking. Now, if I want to show you a cross-section of an endive so you'll see what it looks like. You see down here is your root here, which comes up into a slight little point up there, and then the leaves start very small and they get larger and larger as they come to the outside. And if you want to serve the endive as a salad, you can separate it into long leaves like this. Or if you want sort of a mixed salad, or if you just have one endive left, you can just cut it into pieces like that. And some people soak the leaves in ice water to crisp them up. I never do, but that just depends on what you would like to do. Now the flavor of endive, it has a very delicate character to it, and it has a very slight bitterness, and that is the character of endive, because it's of the chicory family, and that also has a slight bitterness. And if it seems to taste too bitter to you, that means that either you didn't get good fresh endive or you have end-of-season endive. Presumably, the bitterness is in this root end, and some people like to take a little knife and just core out that a little bit from the root end, which would be the same in this long endive if you just cored out that stem. But if you taste it, I don't find it any bitterer than the leaf, but that's just a personal matter, and you can do what you would like. And then, also because of the bitterness, some people like to blanch endive before they cooked it, because we're interested in cooked endive rather than salad endive. And they blanch it for about 10 minutes, and they feel that takes the bitterness out. My colleague Simon Beck always likes to blanch hers, and you just I always if you blanch it, put it in a salad basket and drop it into rapidly boiling salted water and let it boil slowly uncovered for 10 minutes. And then let it cool enough so that you can handle it. And then you want to get all the water out. So take it and just squeeze it very gently to get any drops of water out. But you want to be sure that you don't squeeze it so hard that you make it burst. I frankly never do blanch it, but this is just, it's very useful to know about if you have some end of season endive, just because it gets out that little bitterness. And now, if you do want, I'll give you the first recipe on cooked endive, which is a very quick one, in which you blanch the endive in boiling water for 10 minutes, and then you can cook it à la meunière, which means in butter. And be sure that you use the clear, you melt your butter, and be sure that you use the clear part of the butter, because if you try to cook something in butter that has that, milky residue in the bottom of it, you'll find that the butter all spatters, and it also tastes bad. So be sure that you just use the clear butter. And then put your 10-minute blanched endive in, and you want to brown it lightly on each side, 2 or 3 minutes, and then you cover cook it. And while that's browning, I think I should tell you a little bit more about the name endive. It is the chicory family, and we're all familiar with this curly endive, or some people call it endive, which is also called chicory. And it's the same family as the Belgian endive, though it doesn't look like it. And in Belgium, just to make everybody confused, they call endive les chicorées de Magdebourg, or just chicory. And in Flemish, which is part of Belgium, they call it a wheatloof. I don't know why wheatloof, that's just Flemish for endive. And in France, they call it endive. And sometimes in this country, they call it chicory or succory or endive. But you'll always get what you want if you say Belgian endive or Belgian endive. Now I'm going to see if that has browned a bit on the other side. You brown it lightly on both sides. And then after it's browned on the other side for 2 or 3 minutes, you put salt and pepper and a little lemon juice in. So there's a little pepper and a bit of salt. And then you always use lemon with endive because it seems to bring out the flavor, and it also neutralizes that little bit of bitterness. Then after you've flavored it up this way, you cook it over very low heat with a cover on for about 30 minutes, and that gives you the lovely flavor that it should have. And then after you've cooked it for 30 minutes or longer, you're then ready to serve it. This is a very quick way of doing it, and it's also very good. This would ideally be a little browner than I have made it. And after it's cooked long enough, there's a golden color that is all through it. And then you want to add a little bit more butter and brown it. This is called beurre noir, or black butter sauce. And actually, of course, the butter shouldn't be black. It should just be a nice golden brown. And you want to be very careful when you're making a brown butter sauce. It's the kind of sauce you can serve over calves' brains, that you always use this clear butter. Otherwise, you're just going to have a speckled sauce, and it'll smell bad and taste bad. And that's really the only thing you have to remember about making a butter sauce. And just let this brown a little bit. I'm really doing mostly a sample cooking of this. And then when that is browned, you pour it over your endive, and then sprinkle on a little bit of parsley, and you have a lovely vegetable which you can serve with roast meats or veal in a cream sauce, or you could serve this endive meunière instead of a salad course. So that's a quick recipe. But the most delicious, marvelous recipe of all is braised endive. It takes longer to cook. It takes about 2 hours, but it's very easy to cook once you have it started, because you don't have to look at it. But it has the most marvelous taste and smell. And I think if you're going to go to the expense of endive, that you should cook it absolutely the best way. And now you want to have an oven-proof casserole, and you put your prepared endive in. And you should cook it in one layer. You can cook it in 2 layers, but no more than that. And then you put in some water, which I'll have to get. I'll take a mug for my water. You just want 2 or 3 tablespoons of water, just enough to cover the bottom of the pan by about a quarter of an inch. And then again, you want some lemon juice. If you were using, say, 8 endives, you'd need about half a tablespoon of lemon juice. And then you want salt and butter. And there are many ways of braising endive. This is called les endives braisées à la flamande. And this one, you just get the pure taste of endive and lemon and butter. And then put in for 8 endive, I just got 5 there. You'd put in about 2 good tablespoons of butter. And then you put the cover on, and you let it simmer for about 20 minutes until it is softened nicely, and until almost all of the water is evaporated. And then you take the cover off, and you put on wax paper on top, and this is so that the endive won't brown too much in the oven. And if you were using, you can do it exactly the same way if you're using blanched endive. You blanch it for 10 minutes, and then you don't have the pre-cooking. You just put it in with the same amount of lemon, butter, and just about 2 tablespoons of water. So in other words, you can start it either raw, which I like the best way because I think it has the most flavor, or you can start it blanched, but you use your salt and lemon juice and butter, and then heat it up on the stove and put the cover on, and then it goes into a 325-degree oven. and it has to braise for 2 hours. Now, that seems like a long time, but that is what the true braise is. And what it is, it's a breaking down of the fibers of the vegetable so that all the flavor can penetrate. And you really hardly need to look at it. It's just look at it maybe, say, once every half hour to make sure that it isn't cooking too much. At 325, it won't. And then when it comes out, it's the most lovely smelling stuff you can imagine. There's that paper. And you see, it's a sort of a golden color all over, and you just smell it. It's just an intoxicating smell because it's just sort of butter, lemon, and endive. And one of the nice things about endive is, too, that you can braise it ahead of time. So you could braise it 2 days ahead of time and put it in the refrigerator and reheat it, and it seems to lose none of its flavor at all. So that's one reason it's an awfully good vegetable to have when you're doing all of your own work. And with this braised endive, you can serve it perfectly plain just as it is, arranged on a plate and sprinkled with parsley, or you can use various sauces for it. And I think, well, what was I going to say? Well, there's several sauces, and that's what we're going to do. Now, for instance, a very nice way to serve it is à la Normande, which means simmered in heavy cream. And that's really a gorgeous way to do it. You just put it in a pan and put in, about ½ an inch of cream. And then you put your braised endive in. This is a fairly rich recipe. But it's the kind of one that if you're serving endive in cream, you'd serve it with a plain roast like chicken or lamb chops or a roast veal. Always be careful when you are planning your menu that if you have one rich thing like this, the rest of your menu is fairly plain without much cream in it. And you want to let this simmer very slowly until most of the cream is absorbed. So I'm going to put this on another burner and let it go very slowly by itself while we do another recipe. And a very nice other recipe is one with a Madeira sauce, in which again you use the braised endive. And with the Madeira sauce, you also have a brunoise of vegetables. This we've done several times before. This is just very finely diced celery, onions, and carrots cooked in butter. And I'll start out with the celery. You see that is curved, so to chop it, you go wham! Break it down, and then cut it into very, very, very fine strips. And then gather the strips all together and cut them into very, very, very fine dice. There are two kinds of cut vegetables. The brunoise is a very fine dice, and then you have the duxelles, which is a little bit bigger. And as for the fineness of the brunoise, it's just as fine as you can do it. If you can do it, a 32nd of an inch, that would be perfect. And you do the onion in the same way, cutting it in half and cutting it in very fine strips up and down, remembering to keep it attached to the root end, and then cutting it in very fine horizontal slices, and then just cutting right down in very, 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 very fine dice. And then you do your carrot exactly the same way, and then cook it in butter, and you can add a little bit of very, very finely diced ham too. And that's what it looks like. It's tender and delicious. I'm going to check my cream normand. That seems to be going nicely. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit more. And now you have your cooked brunoise of vegetables, and then you add a little beef bouillon to that. Of course, if you have homemade bouillon, that's all the better. And then we'll have a little bit of Madeira wine. And be sure when you use Madeira wine that you get a good quality of it, and it should be a dry, not a sweet Madeira. I think Sercial, S-E-R-C-I-A-L, that's a type of Madeira. It's best for cooking. It's always rather expensive, but if you're going to use Madeira or any wine in cooking, yep, you've got to get a good quality of it or just leave the wine out entirely. And also if you have some juices from your endive here, you can put the endive juices in and then arrange your endive on a dish. And when your sauce is boiled down, you put arrange the sauce over the endive. I'm just doing a little amount for 2 people there. And then you let this boil down more than I am going to boil it down. And after it's boiled down till it's slightly syrupy, you just pour this over the endive. This really is a delicious way of serving, and it'll be even better if after you've put your Madeira sauce on, you cover it with paper and a cover and then bake it in the oven for about 30 minutes. And then all of the taste of this lovely sauce then soaks into the endive. It's really a lovely way to serve endive. And with this, you could serve it with cream, any kind of a creamed vegetable or lamb. Clean out some more here. And now also you can use endive as a main course in which you can wrap it in ham, and that is very nice. This could be a main course lunch or supper dish. And I have a nice Spanish casserole here which wiggles a little bit on the bottom, but it's very pretty. So I'll use that. And here is some sliced ham. And here you just have to pick up your endive in your fingers and just roll it around the ham. Be sure that you have a kind of ham that you can roll things in. I tried some that came in a can, and it was so stiff that it all broke, and I couldn't roll the endive in. But it should be a delicious quality of ham, naturally. And I'm using an enormous piece of ham because this is a main course. Of course, you could use a half slice if you wanted. That would probably hold 2 more, but I'm just going to use 4. And then this you can just sprinkle with cheese and bake in a 350 oven for about 30 minutes so that the ham and the endive exchange their flavors. Or you can cover it with a Mornay sauce. And a Mornay sauce is simply our old friend sauce bechamel, which we've made so many times that I'm not making it again. I have some already. And that, as you remember, is simply a roux of flour and butter cooked together and then hot milk beaten in and then cooked until it's nice just for about a minute or 2, and then you add a little bit of cheese, and that turns it into a Mornay. And this is Swiss cheese. You always use grated Swiss cheese in French cooking, and then the sauce goes over the ham. You want to be sure and have the sauce fairly thick, because as this bakes, the sauce thins out a little bit. And then you put sprinkle a little bit of grated cheese over that again, and then just a little tiny bit of melted butter. And the nice thing also about this recipe is that you can do it entirely ahead and then bake it in the oven when you're ready to bake it. And this would go into a 375-degree oven and let it bake for 30 to 40 minutes until it is bubbling hot and the top is brown. Now I'm going to finish my Normande. Now this, while it's cooking, you want to baste it a little bit with the sauce so that the cream gets all in through it. This is about, say, a 20-minute simmer. And then that goes onto a plate. And you'll notice that with the cream, after you've boiled it down, it sometimes looks as though it were a little bit lumpy. But you can fix that by just beating a little bit more cream and some butter into it. So don't be disturbed if it looks a little bit funny after you've simmered your endive in it. You should have a little more lemon juice and a little more cream, and that will immediately smooth it out. And then some lemon in it. I think this is one of the most delicious of the endive recipes. There's a little lemon. Then you wouldn't think it needed anything else, but as a final little bit of smoothing, put in just a little bit of butter. And that always adds that je ne sais quoi, which is so delicious. And then be sure and taste it. That's one of the great privileges of cooking. Just right. Needs a little bit of more pepper in. Well, this is really, it's just lovely. You see how that sauce is nicely smoothed out. You want just enough to cover that endive. You could imagine how that would be with a roast of lamb. It's just perfect. And then a bit of parsley on, and that's all ready to serve. What would we do without parsley, I wonder, because this would be a rather pale dish to serve otherwise. And then that is all ready. And of course, this one, again, you'd be able to do ahead of time and just reheat in the cream and smooth the cream sauce all off again. I mean, smooth out the cream sauce with your butter and taste it. So that again is this wonderful business of endive that you can cook ahead. Maybe that's why it's such an expensive vegetable, because it is so amenable. And now here's our gratin with the ham in it, and I'm going to take these all into the dining room so you can see our endive feast. Now, there's our gratin mornay with the ham, which makes a lovely, you could use this as a first course or as a main course, giving everybody several of these. And then our endive à la crème goes beautifully if you have a saddle of lamb, for instance, and some pommes de terre Anna, and some endive normande à la crème. You can't imagine a nicer kind of a meal than that. And then there's a little lovely lamb sauce that goes on. My, that looks good. Now you can see really what a lovely vegetable this is. And if your market doesn't carry endive, just ask them for it. They'll stock endive if there is enough requests for it. And also you can create a demand by serving Belgian endive to your friends in any one of these lovely recipes, and that will create the demand for it. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated. Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking,